the Pacific Ocean. An expanse of water so vast, it seems like another planet. For the whalers of the 19th century, it was a battlefield. A liquid desert where an uneven war was waged against the giants of the sea. But one ship, the whaleship Essex, did not fight a war. It was the victim of an execution. In 1820, it was attacked and sunk by a massive, intelligent, and seemingly vengeful sperm whale. The survivors found themselves on 3 small whaleboats, thousands of miles from land. Their 90-day odyssey pushed them beyond all limits, forcing them to commit the most unspeakable act to survive. This is the terrifying true story that inspired Moby Dick. But the reality was far worse than the fiction. The true stories on this channel are based on real, often dark and unsettling historical events. This video contains descriptions of shipwreck and survival cannibalism. Viewer discretion is advised. If you love extreme survival stories and the real events, subscribe to the channel now. Leave a like, turn on the bell, and leave a comment to support this project. Our story begins in the most unlikely of places, Nantucket. 1819. Today it's a quiet holiday island, but back then it was the whaling capital of the world. A small piece of land dominated by a single, pungent smell, that of rendered whale oil and money. The streets were filled with sailors of every race and nation. Officers' wives scanned the horizon from widows' walks built on their rooftops, waiting for years for husbands who would often never return. Leaving from Nantucket wasn't an adventure. It was a gamble with death. In this harbor, a ship prepares to sail. She is the Essex. She is not a glorious vessel. She is old, small, and according to some sailors, unlucky. On her previous voyage, she was hit by a storm that nearly sank her. Now, with a crew of 21 men, she readies herself for one of the longest and most dangerous missions. 2.5 years into the remote heart of the Pacific Ocean, in command is Captain George Pollard Jr., young and on his first command, eager to prove his worth. His second is first mate Owen Chase, more experienced, pragmatic, and ambitious. A latent rivalry exists between them. And then there is the cabin boy, the youngest on board, 14-year-old Thomas Nickerson. It is through his terrified eyes that, decades later, we will know much of this story. These men do not know that their journey will turn them into characters in one of the greatest and most terrible stories ever told. Life on board is an exhausting monotony, interrupted by moments of pure chaos and violence. The sighting of a whale turns the ship into an arena. Small boats are lowered into the sea, with men armed with hand-thrown harpoons. Striking the whale is only the beginning. Often, the wounded creature flees, dragging the small boat on a mad race through the waves, the so-called Nantucket sleigh ride. It is a deadly rodeo that can last for hours. Once killed, the giant carcass is tied to the ship. The men climb onto the slippery body and with sharp flensing knives cut it to pieces, melting the blubber in large furnaces on deck. The ship transforms into a floating factory, shrouded in black smoke and the nauseating smell of burning flesh. This was their world, till the day they met a whale that decided it would not be the prey. November 20th, 1820. The Essex is in one of the most remote areas of the equatorial Pacific, a region whalers called the offshore grounds. It is a water desert, thousands of miles from the nearest land. While Captain Pollard is away, First Mate Owen Chase spots a strange pod of sperm whales. Among them is one abnormally large, almost twice the size of the others. It's an old male, estimated to be 85 feet long with a massive scarred head. But its size isn't the strangest thing, it's its behavior. Instead of fleeing from the whaleboats, the creature stops. It seems to be observing them. Then it dives and disappears. A moment later, it resurfaces and heads straight for the Essex, which has stayed behind for repairs. With terrifying speed, it strikes the ship a first time mid-haul. The impact is so violent that the entire crew is thrown to the deck. The whale passes under the keel, resurfaces on the other side, turns, and looks at the damaged ship as if evaluating its work. The terrified crew tries to regain control, but the nightmare is not over. Owen Chase would later recall that the whale seemed driven by human rage and vengeance. The animal charges again, this time aiming straight for the bow, its massive head used as a battering ram. The second impact is final. The wood shatters, water floods the hold. In less than 10 minutes, the Essex, a 238-ton ship, lists on its side and begins to sink. The panicked crew barely manages to retrieve a few navigational instruments and a handful of hardtack and water before abandoning the ship on the 3 small whaleboats. They are alone. 21 men on 3 small boats with supplies for just a few days. Around them, nothingness. Captain Pollard suggests heading for the Marquesas Islands, the closest land. But Owen Chase and the crew object. They have heard terrifying stories of islands inhabited by cannibals in that direction. It is a decision that will prove fatal. They choose the longer, almost impossible route towards South America against the wind and currents. Thus begins one of the most harrowing odysseys in maritime history. The days turn into weeks. The sun cooks them alive. The hardtack, soaked with salt water, becomes an inedible mush. Thirst drives them to madness. They begin to drink their own urine, then seawater, which causes dehydration and hallucinations. Sharks relentlessly follow their boats, waiting. One day, a storm separates them. Owen Chase's whaleboat finds itself alone, the other 2 lost over the horizon. Men begin to die. The first is a sailor named Lawson. His body is sewn into a canvas sack and buried at sea, according to tradition. But when the second man dies, tradition is broken. It is Owen Chase who proposes the unthinkable. To bury another body at sea, he says, is to throw away food sent by God. After a harrowing debate, the decision is made. The sailor's body is dismembered. His heart and organs are removed and eaten first. Flesh is cut into strips and left to dry in the sun. They have crossed the point of no return. But the descent into horror is not over. On Captain Pollard's boat, with no more bodies to eat, the situation is even more desperate. The men decide to draw lots to decide who must be sacrificed to save the others. They prepare the straws. Captain Pollard looks at his 17-year-old cousin, Owen Coffin, whom he had promised his mother he would protect. The lot falls to the boy. Pollard is destroyed. He offers to take his place, to die for him. But young Coffin refuses with a terrible calm. "No," he says, "the lot is mine. No, it is only right." Another sailor offers to shoot him to spare the captain the task. Coffin lies down in the bottom of the boat, and he is killed. After 90 days of hell at sea, the few survivors are finally spotted. Owen Chase and the 2 men on his whaleboat are rescued by an English ship. They are barely human, skeletons covered in sores with vacant stares, sucking the marrow from the bones of their dead shipmates. The last 2 men on Captain Pollard's boat are also found, thousands of miles away. Of the 8 survivors, all will return to Nantucket, where the tale of their odyssey and their terrible secret shocks the community. Owen Chase, to exorcise his demons, writes a detailed and chilling memoir about the disaster. Years later, that book ends up in the hands of a young sailor and writer looking for inspiration, a man named Herman Melville. Melville is thunderstruck by the story, especially by the figure of the vengeful whale. He takes the incredible whale attack, the obsession of the hunt, and the human tragedy, and transforms them into his immortal masterpiece, Moby Dick. But as is often the case, the truth that inspired the legend was far more raw, desperate, and terrifying than the fiction. Because in Moby Dick, man hunts a monster. But in the true story of the Essex, the men to survive had to become monsters themselves. If you love extreme survival stories and the real events, subscribe to the channel now. Leave a like, turn on the bell, and leave a comment to support this project.